I've already learned two important things today, two important things I learned was, you know, I always thought that if you give a talk about the internet, you can't wear a tie. So we're going to see that premise violated. And the other thing is, if you're talking about complex systems, you have to wear all black, right? You know, you've seen that movie Jurassic Park, right? The Jeff Goldblum. So okay, those two preconceived notions were dashed. In any case, thank you for coming this afternoon. I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker for this session, George Conrades. George has played a foundational role as an early member of Akamai Technologies. He's going to tell us about how Akamai got started and what it does. But prior to Akamai, he was CEO of Bolt, Beranek & Newman, BBN, that was recently acquired by Raytheon. He was a senior vice president at IBM. He has an undergraduate degree in math and physics from Ohio Wesleyan and an MBA from University of Chicago. So George is getting set up. Are you good to go?
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. It's great to be here at the Thayer School of Engineering, and it's great to be back in Hanover. Our son Gus graduated from Dartmouth in 1990, and so this wonderful campus has a very special place in our hearts. And speaking of that, so does my wife, Patsy, who wouldn't miss coming back. Terry McGuire, who's chair of the overseers, asked me to speak. Am I using this mic or that mic? This is off? Okay. Terry McGuire, chair of the overseers, asked if I would speak at this symposium on complex engineering systems, and my immediate reaction is, what do I know about that? Actually, I felt a little better when I saw an earlier title for this symposium, and it said Human-Centric Complex Engineering Systems. And I thought to myself, well, human-centric. There might be something I could bring to this from my liberal arts background. It seems to me that most complex engineering systems are complex because they are human-centric. But then the title, the words human-centric disappeared from the title. I said, McGuire, what do you got me into here? And he said, just talk about your experiences, stories from your business career, about what it takes to commercialize technology, getting people to work together to create value in the marketplace, and about the challenges of shaping something that people are willing to buy more than just the fundamental technology, no matter how innovative that may be. So that's what I plan to do, and offer some insights from my 31 years at IBM and subsequently Bolt, Beranek & Newman and Akamai Technologies. And by the way, if you came to this session to hear about security, you're going to get that in the panel discussion that follows. So let me begin with some personal perspective. At 70 years of age, a high schooler in the 50s, and nearly 50 years in business, I've had the good fortune of experiencing at least 3 of the next big things in a lifetime. And that was the bursting of rock and roll onto the mainstream culture in the 1950s, the widespread adoption of the computer by business in the 60s, and then, of course, the explosion of the internet in the 1990s. Each characterized by the fact that the kids got it and the parents didn't. Whole new technologies, companies, industries were spawned as a result, creating billions of dollars in value. We might be seeing a fourth, social networking. That was covered quite a bit in the morning session. Some say it's replacing email for business, even. Others say that the handheld could be as transformative as the PC. There was also a discussion about devices on our bodies, interconnected. And you might have your own favorites in nanotechnology, or as the posters say outside, in energy, or in life sciences. The facts are that innovation is presenting opportunity all around us, all the time. I was actually determined to be a rock drummer when I graduated from college in 1961, until the heads of the math and the physics department got hold of me and they said, "Oh, no, you're not. You are going to go out and interview these companies who are just now getting into the computer business." Fortunately, I chose IBM, which was just introducing its first transistorized business computer. How lucky was that? Now, how many of you have read The Outliers, the story of success? Outlier readers by Malcolm Gladwell. It's a terrific book about the importance of being in the right place at the right time. Some would say luck. Another book published about the same time is Jeff Colvin's book, Why Talent is Overrated. Similar theme. Both authors emphasize that beside talent and being at the right place at the right time, the importance of practice and working together collaboratively with others in pursuit of a common goal. Gladwell asserts that it takes about 10,000 hours of repetition before the human brain gets it, and difficult tasks become intuitive. And he gives the examples of the Beatles, who had played 1,200 performances together before their bombshell introduction to the American public on the Ed Sullivan television show in 1964. Most bands never play 1,200 performances together in their entire career. So no wonder the Beatles' music and their lyrics are some of the most popular of our lifetimes. And you talk about creating billions in value. You may notice in the most recent press there's quite an issue about downloading Beatles music now. Well, did they have to like each other? Maybe, maybe not. Certainly not all the time, but they agreed to make it work. Think, respect. That's not always easy. It takes a lot of hard work to get humans to put the goal ahead of themselves and work together in a sustained way to create value. And that's at the essence of what I want to talk about today. It's also one of the reasons that Gladwell points out that social skills are more important than IQ after a certain level of intelligence, the ability to work well with others. Now, I think that's especially true if you want to be a leader. I happen to believe that some of the best leaders I've ever met are ones that have engineering backgrounds because they prize fact-based analysis and they're able to inspire others to achieve a common goal. I understand a number of you have aspirations to create your own businesses, and a number of Thayer graduates have gone on to do just that. I think that's a very noble objective. I believe that business, especially entrepreneurial activity, is one of the greatest human activities outside of family. When I joined IBM, that was the place to be. The industry and the company were relatively young. IBM was only a couple $1 billion in revenue at that time, and computers about several $100 million of that. But we were growing exponentially. It was a rocket ship. So how did IBM distinguish itself in the marketplace, pull away from the pack, gain such market dominance while crushing their early competitors? There are several reasons, but I believe that in addition to engineering prowess, IBM created a very strong culture. It came right from the top. And it kept the employees focused on fundamental principles while rapidly expanding the business. There were three. Be the best in customer satisfaction. Number one. That's more than product, right? Excellence in every task. Of course, that's quality from product to process to service, and respect for the individual. meaning your fellow employees up and down the line. Management's expectation at that time was best categorized as show up on time, dress to play. Show up means take the initiative, go for it. Woody Allen says that 85% of life is just showing up. On time means you care, that you're accountable, and dress to play means that you've done your homework, you're familiar with the facts, and you're able to argue your assumptions. Attitude, I think, means a lot. I have a favorite quote from a fellow by the name of Charles Swindoll, who says that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. And he says, I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. We are in charge of our attitudes. This is a quite different talk than what you heard this morning with the engineering people, I know, but it has to do with the human element. Speaking of attitude, Mark Twain once said, you know, if you swallow a toad in the morning, your day can't get any worse. Now I found out what appeals to you, and I'll see if I can come up with some others. As a young salesman, I got some great advice from a crusty old manager. He said, make your numbers, make your commitments, performance sells. It helps to establish your credibility, of course, and especially when you're helping you work more productively with others. And one day I had an epiphany. I really wanted to become a manager of people. I realized that that's actually how things get done at scale, getting people to work together in a productive manner to create value. As a manager, you are helping others to be their best, where the measure of their success is your own. So if you want to start a company, you want to be a CEO, manage a complex process, well, have you practiced being a manager? Essentially, that's where my 10,000 hours have been invested. It takes time and experience to develop your leadership skills, and that's really what a good manager is, of course, a leader. I don't know, in fact, I do know, I know that Thayer offers interdisciplinary courses with Tuck, and I highly commend that to you because it's an essential part of getting your wonderful inventions into the marketplace. And you'll learn some valuable lessons. For one, don't expect what you don't inspect, meaning you just can't delegate to others and think that good things are going to happen, especially not in a complex environment. First, it's important to be clear about your goals and your expectations of the people that you're working with. And one trick I learned in those early days was to simply put their names down one side of a piece of paper and their responsibilities and their short-term objectives across the top, and then I'd fill it all in. And then we'd individually have frequent communications while they struggle to read upside down what I had on that paper by their name. But the point is, I wanted to make these sessions the very best hour of their day. We're talking openness and transparency of information. We're talking data analysis. We're talking problem sharing. We're talking accountability, and especially the leader's personal involvement. If you're a first-line manager, most of the time your direct reports are doing similar tasks, so coaching is very important. If you're at the top, most of your direct reports are doing different tasks, but they're highly interdependent. And so coordination and decision-making are key. The more complex the mission becomes, the more important this active coordination becomes. People hate ambiguity, and when it really gets complex, they crave leadership. One of the smartest young people I've ever met, PhD in engineering, by the way, worked for me in a key job. But he analyzed everything to the point of 6 of one, half a dozen of another. He could not make a decision. In a way, he was too smart. He saw all the ramifications, like chess. He saw all the moves. He could not make a decision. He drove his people crazy as he did the rest of us, so I had to let him go. But what he didn't understand was that when wrestling with a complex decision, you sometimes just have to give it your best shot. Because every decision that you make is just a new set of problems that you just chose to solve. And it's important to keep moving because you often get additional cracks at that decision as things progress, meaning you learn even more by doing. You in engineering would probably call that feedback loops. Lack of leadership was no more apparent than in my last years at IBM, where sadly the company was rapidly beginning to decline. And by the way, most do at some point in time. Think sine curves, or as some of my biotech friends say, think helix. But in any event, we had lost focus on the customer, and we had gotten unwieldy. We had divisions for mainframe, for PCs, for storage, for networking, for services and geographic delivery entities, each under the direction of a senior executive more concerned about their own backyard than the success of the whole. And all under a CEO who failed to bring the people together under a common vision, as tough a job as that is. It was so bad that the CEO was considering breaking the company up among those individual components I just listed off. And what a disaster that would have been. About 700 customers accounted for 70% of IBM's revenues. They wanted an integrated IBM. Moreover, our R&D and our customer relationships were the two most enduring strengths of IBM. Each like the ends of a barbell, where the products were that slender bar in the middle, and they were transitory. We would have looked just like every other product vendor in our space and given up our strongest assets. It took a new CEO from the outside, Lou Gerstner, Dartmouth graduate, to get IBM back on track with people all rowing in a common direction, particularly around services to help the customers integrate the technology. After some 31 years, I retired about a year before Lou came and spent some months relaxing and thinking about what to do next. If you intend to become serial entrepreneurs, you're going to have times like that between companies. It's not always an easy time on your family. Frankly, you're in the way. And never, ever rearrange the freezer. I did that one day. You know, your wife's out shopping, and you open the freezer door, and all kinds of things come sliding out onto the floor, and you say, oh, all we need here is a little organization. Can't be that complex, right? So we got the fish on the top, the meat on the poultry down there. Here comes the ice cream. Beautiful, except when Mama gets home. And she opens the freezer door, and, well, let's just say it was time to find another job. I forgot the human-centric part of this. She said to me, I don't come to your office, you stay the heck out of mine. And by the way, go out and find the next big thing, just like you did with computers. So I did. BBN is a very prestigious advanced research and development organization doing work primarily for the United States government. I was approached in 1993 by their board to help them get more value from their inventions beyond their cost-plus R&D contracts with the government. And I was intrigued. How do you commercialize a think tank? That's a puzzle to solve. Moreover, BBM was a laboratory for creating the next big thing. After all, they held the contract to create the ARPANET, which was the forerunner of the Internet. They invented the first router. They invented the first PC modem. They sent the first email. That fellow that did that, Ray Tomlinson, is still at BBN. He's the one who put the @ convention into all of our email addresses. I was talking to Ray one day, and I said to him, what did you say in that first message? And he said, oh, gee, George, I don't remember. I told him, Ray, make something up. Along the way, BBN did pioneering work in parallel processors, speech recognition, natural language understanding, but they hadn't realized any substantial commercial value. And I love the scientists, the PhDs. They were so smart, so creative. They are to this day. They're all about ideas, working independently, sometimes in teams, but thinking, invent the new, rather than about scale. This is a perfect environment for where invention takes place, and nothing much happens after that. They got paid for the contract, they invented the new, whoa. And that's the problem that I was asked to address. It's really hard to imagine those engineers wanting to do the same thing twice. These are brilliant folks, many of them, probably some of them from here, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, wherever. So we decided to separate church from state and create a commercial subsidiary focused on the internet. It was 1994, and the internet was rapidly moving from its academic and government roots into the commercial marketplace, even though it had been around since 1969. And did we know the internet? But what we didn't know anything about was becoming a commercial internet services provider, an ISP. So we hired people with commercial experience from the telecom industries, the services industries. We bought several networks in the hotspots then of the internet. 1994, it was in New England, it was in the Bay Area, and it was in Washington, D.C., greater Washington, D.C., southeast, with all those research universities. And so in just a few years, we stitched all that together. We became the third largest ISP in the world behind UUNet and PSINet, if you remember those names. They are also all gone, absorbed. Now, the techniques we developed to scale and to win in the marketplace, I'm going to talk about when I talk about Akamai. But the lesson we learned here is the obvious one. It's just not good enough to invent a new technology. You have got to create value that customers are willing to pay for and deliver that in a highly reliable and consistent fashion. Jeffrey Moore wrote a book that I highly commend to you. I don't know if it's part of your curriculum or not. It's called Crossing the Chasm. Has anyone read that? Only a couple hands. I really, really encourage you, Thayer students, to read Crossing the Chasm. He describes the growth phases an entrepreneurial company goes through in the context of its offers and its customers. From the siren song of the early adopters who will buy just about anything, even unproven technology, amazing, to a much larger market of traditional risk-averse customers who want a defined and repeatable offer. That's the chasm between the early adopters and which we'd call more normal customers. And then scaling that offer in volume to fulfill its marketplace potential. It takes a lot of customer feedback to shape a repeatable offer that can be supported and then built upon for gaining additional customer wallet share. After BBN was bought by GTE, I decided I would become the next big thing, and that would be a venture capitalist. Remember, this was 1998, boy, and that's who was hot then. And that's how I met Terry when Polaris Venture Partners asked if I would join in the summer of 1998. Now, after watching the professionals at Polaris evaluate early-stage ideas, I developed a shorthand criteria for deciding which ones had the most promise. First, was it a big idea? Would it fulfill a real need? Have unfair technology advantage over the old way or against newer competitors? Two, did the technology work? Nothing worse than a big idea that cannot be fulfilled. Three, could you actually make money? And that is, does the business model, support a strategy that could achieve revenue growth at reasonable cost and expense and at appropriate capital investment? And most important, did you believe in the people? Their experience, their expertise, their leadership skills, their essential goodness. Their essential goodness. Is this really someone you want to give your money to? think, trust. It wasn't long before an MIT professor and his graduate student showed up with a very big idea, and that was to make the internet feasible for robust electronic commerce and rich audio-visual exchange. At the time, about 7,000 networks made up the internet. Today, there are about 13,000 networks interconnected that make up the internet, each competing with one another, yet each committed to exchanging data under a common protocol. The thing to understand is that whenever a network is sending traffic to another network, they are reducing the load and the costs on their own network, and so they do this very aggressively, without regard, I can assure you of this, about performance, availability, or even the end consumer. After all, most of the end consumers, more than 90%, are not on their own network. Try sending a large amount of data over the internet, a large amount, and you'll notice it doesn't work too well, the worldwide weight. That's why some people describe the internet as networks of fire hoses interconnected by garden hoses. And what's going on here is it's a way to protect one's capital investment from the other networks. And after all, you only get paid by the consumers on your network, not the other guys. And as a result, the internet was, is, and always will be filled with bottlenecks between networks and the inherent breakdowns within them. And that's just the way it is, resulting in a very hostile environment for heavy or rich data streams, think television, let alone fast response time from a shopping website, or accelerating business-to-business transactions. So how to solve for congestion? Well, after steadily growing demand, against steadily growing demand for the internet to be used as a business tool to fulfill its promise of revolutionizing the way business works, and we saw a lot of that this morning, the way work gets done, just like the business computer 40 years ago did. Well, the folks from the Laboratory of Computer Science at MIT had an answer. Our co-founder and chief scientist, Tom Layton, he still heads the algorithms group there, and Danny Lewin, his graduate student, determined after many different approaches that a highly distributed model was the most, if not the only, feasible way of creating a global platform that could scale with demand indefinitely. That meant thousands of servers would need to be placed inside those thousands of networks so that website content could be stored near requesting consumers wherever they were in the world, and for the most part be delivered locally. Now we have a senior executive from Yahoo here. I'd venture to guess, they're a terrific customer, that Yahoo is, the homepage is stored in literally right now in every one of those 50,000 plus computers that are out there because it's such a popular site. And therefore, they solved the problem of how to manage the global demand and response time on popular but inherently centralized websites, websites that would pay for this service. Now, managing such a global overlay network would require a huge software investment with very advanced algorithms. So you talk about a complex engineering system. Yep, but they had proof of concept. Also intriguing was, unlike the network themselves, this did not require a lot of capital. The model was not capital intensive, mostly just some servers and some bandwidth. And the networks would be happy to have these servers in their networks. Why? Because they improved performance for the consumers that were on their networks. After all, Yahoo was right there locally, and helped defray the volume of upstream traffic that would have been coming into their networks, save that they didn't have to go back and get it each and every time. The financial model had the potential of being a combination of both the telecom services model, recurring revenue, and the software model of low capital investment and high scalability. And best of all, we love the people, their intelligence, their enthusiasm, their commitment, especially Danny, trained by his duty in the Israeli Special Forces, who believed that leadership had three essential components: lead by example, suffer together, hold people accountable, and get rid of non-performers. Polaris invested, I invested, and went on the board, and then a few months later was asked to be the CEO, April of 1999. First, we created a mission statement. You'd be surprised at how many companies, if you ask them for a mission statement, can't tell you what it is. And what that tells you is that there are a lot of people that don't know exactly what the hell they're doing. Akamai exists to make the internet predictable, scalable, and secure. And then we created guiding principles that said things will always do and things will never do. Here's an always do. Always work as a team to understand, to anticipate, and satisfy customer and marketplace needs while delivering world-class service. And a never do, well, here's one for you. Never dismiss ideas from any source without consideration. Think about that. Do you hear respect for the individual? We also meant to underscore that fresh perspectives from different experiences and different functions will often get to a better idea. It quickly became apparent, though, that speed to market was critical to establishing market leadership. Others were entering the marketplace, but deploying servers on their own networks and claiming just as good as Akamai. So despite our unique distributed architecture, which to this day creates an unfair technology advantage, and in fact, with the load on our platform, even more unfair advantage, we understood that there were three essential elements to master if you wanted to lead the marketplace, and they were customers, networks, and technology. A virtuous circle, if you will. The more servers we had in more networks, the better our performance, and thus the more that websites would prefer our service. And because they were under 12-month contracts or greater, these websites were harder to get, not as easily available to our competitors. And of course, we went for the biggest, most valuable websites where our value proposition could be even more clearly demonstrated. And the more website requests we were delivering on this global overlay network, at first there were only thousands of requests or hits, if you will, per second. The more our engineers were informed about our technology, what changes were needed in the software, how to better avoid the bottlenecks on the internet, how to improve our internal processes so that we would never go down while at the same time improving our service. So you talk about feedback. It was in real time, and to this day still is. So eager to win, our managers developed 90-day commitment plans. We really had to move fast. They would pledge to one another, all in the same room, I will do the following by the end of the quarter, 90-day commitment plans. And they had to say what it is they would do. Ship so many servers into so many networks, get so many customers signed up, get so many live on the network, get such and such new software rolled out, get identified errors in that software fixed, all by such and such a date. So at the beginning of every quarter, around the room, they would go making these pledges to one another. And they would include dependencies that they had on one another, and often that was a big surprise to another person in the room. Dependent on me, I don't have that on my list, but you could realize the interconnection. See it on the slide up there? Quarter's end, they would grade their accomplishments, red, yellow, green, in front of one another. So did we make our numbers or our commitments, or did we not? You talk about openness and transparency of information, data sharing, problem sharing, accountability for results. Best of all, it worked. And the team got stronger while non-performers were easy to spot and change out. And we learned from each other. We celebrated together, strengthening our collective IQ. So the complex system of management got smarter and smarter and smarter. The late 1990s were pretty heady days for the internet, but alas, it was not to last. In the year 2000, the dot-com bubble burst, and some of you may remember this. And as a result, our volumes fell away. We went into retraction. We laid people off. We got out of real estate leases. We froze wages, and the top three of us took our total compensation to just $25,000 a year. These were not fun times. Our stock price went from a high of over $320 a share at the end of 1999 to just 71 cents a share in 2002. The employees were frightened, but we did suffer together. The biggest change we had to make was to turn to large enterprises for our customers while keeping everybody in Akamai in the game. So it was goodbye surfmonkey.com, hello generalmotors.com. Much harder to sell. These were not the dot-com early adopters who got it. These were enterprises where we had to learn all over again how to make our value proposition. They demanded cost-benefit analysis before a decision could be made. They demanded a test drive before a contract could be signed, and they were judging us on our responsiveness to special features. What got us through this were those four fundamentals of why we existed in the first place. Did we have a big idea? Well, we did. It just took longer to sell, and our confidence was gaining by the day. Did our technology continue to work? Well, a lot better than our competitors. We still to this day spend a third of our R&D budget bulletproofing our technology platform from all the bad things on the internet that you'll hear about in the security panel. And from ourselves, by the way, because we roll out new software releases every week on top of a network that never comes down. That's really an important comment. It never comes down while we change the software in all the servers. We were further bolstered by customers requesting new services from us, which is a good problem to have. Our negative profits and our negative cash flow were slowly receding, getting better. And best of all, as I constantly reminded the employees, look to your left, look to your right. Do you like what you see? Where else would you rather work? Smart people love working with smart people. And particularly in a culture where facts are more important than title, where decision-making is more important than hoarding or hiding information from your fellow employee. So we took an employee survey about a year or so ago, and one of the top reasons that people work at Akamai is their respect for their fellow employees. Some of that I'm sure, to how we hire, which is largely by peer review. Well, our annual revenues are now over $800 million, headed toward $1 billion shortly. From 3,000 enterprise customers, we have nearly $1 billion in the bank. Our gross margins, cash gross margins, are over 80%. Our EBITDA margins are in the mid-40s. So why tell you all this besides pride? Because these are the metrics that demonstrate that our complex system is both effective and efficient. Effective at delivering customer value and efficient in our execution. Everything is not perfect every day, but as managers, we worry about it every day, which is a good thing. So today, we're a lot more complex. We have 5 major services: media and entertainment delivery, software delivery, dynamic site delivery for electronic commerce sites, advertising solutions, and acceleration of business-to-business applications, running about 25 services, 10 million lines of code, all running on the same global overlay platform. We just introduced a high-definition television offering. You can watch it at Sunday around noontime on ESPN's Fantasy Football. High def on your PC. Our network is now processing over 10 million requests a second on behalf of our customers. That's some 900 billion hits per day on that network. We're transferring over 2 terabytes of data per second. That's 20 petabytes. Now the engineers are starting to look at me. We're 20 petabytes of data a day. Kevin Kelly of the New York Times says that that's about half the entire written works of all humankind since the beginning of recorded history in all languages. That's quite an engineering feat, and it's a big responsibility. But we have a person running our business today, Paul Sagan, a team of top-flight senior managers who've worked together for mostly 5 to 10 years. Most of these, they are all really smart people, but most important, they prize fact-based analysis, question assumptions, argue strongly over conclusions, making their case for particular outcomes. In many ways, then, our management system is akin to our network. It's highly distributed, no single point of failure, and yet information is always flowing, constantly improving, and getting to a better idea. Jim Collins wrote a book. You ever read From Good to Great? Oh, you guys, you folks have, if you want to take all this genius you have and go out in the marketplace, you have got to get outside and read some of this stuff. It's, I'm telling you. Okay, among a number of things, I'm almost done. Among a number of things he describes are the companies who have demonstrated sustained success over years are data-driven, and they readily confront the brutal facts. They concentrate on unpleasant findings, and they quickly take action to address them, correct them. That book is required reading for all of our managers at Akamai. And you know, in this highly connected, ever-changing world with unprecedented volumes now of data, do you know there are some 3 billion people connected to the internet right now? That's amazing, don't you think? Look at that screen. All that data available to be mined for even greater understanding than ever before. So it isn't now any longer good enough to just share anecdotes, stories, you know, from the latest field trip to influence a decision. Or said another way, the plural of anecdote isn't data. Come on, engineers, you'll get it. So getting to decisions isn't always straightforward. And smart people have different views about facts and conclusions. So I'm going to close on a lighter, it's a risque story about the difference between facts and conclusions. Abraham Lincoln, before he was president, was a lawyer. This is a true story. And he rode the circuit in Illinois defending hapless souls. One day he was in a town, and the prosecutor was pointing at Lincoln's defendant and claiming that the facts in the case, from the facts in the case, you could only conclude that this person was guilty. And he cited fact 1, fact 2, fact 3, fact 4. Pretty impressive. And then he sat down. Lincoln got up and he said, gentlemen of the jury, he said, facts are facts, but conclusions are another matter. And I want to tell you a story. And it's a story about a farmer who had a particularly good crop of grain, and so he hired workers to help him with the harvest. Farmer also had a very attractive teenage daughter and a very young son. And one day, the young son ran into the house and said, Father, sister is in the hayloft with her skirt up to here. The hired hand is in the hayloft with his pants down, and they're going to pee all over our grain. He concluded with facts are facts, but conclusions are another matter, and that is why we need human-centric in our complex engineering systems. Thank you very much. Well, you can do the panel. Huh?
Well, we're going to, I think we have a break. We have a break. If there's a couple of questions directed to George right now, we can take those.
I probably used up all my time. Okay, so I think the question is, do you have to be as astute about the details of the engineering, the software, and so forth to be the CEO, or at what level can this kind of phase out? I might even be a good example of that. Certainly within the engineering ranks, the people that manage our engineering departments, including the person that heads engineering, are both very good at what they do. They have credibility. They can lead. They may not know everything, but they are recognized as being accomplished engineers. And, that's why I said it earlier, they can inspire others to achieve a common goal. How they got that is a variety of factors. We try hard with training, but some of them have it more naturally than others. I'm a liberal arts guy, but I'll tell you one thing. I love engineers. And the reason I do is it's so much fun to listen to somebody who's very smart and is telling you about something they just created. And I think you can begin to create a bond in that sense where you become more accepted. And I do things they don't do. I make decisions, and I bear the results of that, but I do it with informed, consent. And so I think there's a combination of respect for them. I think and it works the other way. And so, but I think, and also then your continued performance. If you're screwing it up, you are not going to keep the affection of the engineers. The other thing I do is I do a trick that I think a lot of liberal arts people, maybe everybody does, but if I'm listening to a discussion like I was doing this morning, that I don't fully understand what people are talking about, I create kind of a right-brained template as to what I'm hearing. And when I hear a discontinuity over whatever it is I constructed, it's time to ask a question. And often if you do that, you're going to stump the band. The engineer will look at you and say, whoa. And that's because you were at least listening, and you created some set of understandings of your own that you compared a discontinuity to. And it kind of helps you, again, with your credibility. I think you have to work at it. But above all, I really believe this. You really have to have a high affection. If you're in a high-tech technology company and you're a liberal arts manager at some level responsible for this, you had better love the engineers. Yeah.
Clearly, the system, it's interesting. Historically, if we think about IBM, we think about a very controlled sort of structure. Even the whole white shirt, this idea that it's an army and the product that was being sold was a controlled product. And watching you at Akamai, you had this anarchy called the internet that was exploding, and you were riding the wave of that. And so I guess my question for you is, looking forward, are you concerned that the human complex systems at some point will not be able to match the speed at which the technical complex system is growing and becoming anarchist?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard Terry's question, but he said as IBM is growing and the speed that Akamai is growing, and the speed that it's growing, are we concerned that we won't be as cohesive as we were when we were a startup company? Terry was on the board, and he knows it was 24/7, but the communication links were so short, and the kind of thing I described to you. It's why I said to you that we worry about it every day now that we're this size. That's exactly the reason I said, and we do worry about it. And so you create different management techniques, but the one thing you must do is invest in management development. If you are going to have a larger and larger organization, you should be very clear about the simplicity of your mission. You should be sure that organizationally it's aligned with the fulfillment of that mission, and you should be very sure that the people in those boxes are the very best you can find. And if they're not, do not put up with that for a minute. You had better get somebody that can do that better from inside or from outside. I think you have to be ruthless about that, and so many firms fail to deal with that because people, get involved with people and they get comfortable with people, but they're not really as good as they need to be in a very dynamic, fast-growing environment where competition is coming at you from all corners, especially now international competition. So I think management development is a huge part of this. If you're going to delegate and you are going to have people who you expect you know, to carry out certain missions, they need to be trained, and they need to have. We're putting more money, just proportionally more money than we ever had before in management development, because it's the only way you can scale. These are people. That's why I said, be a manager of people. It's the only way things get done at scale is to get groups of people executing in a consistent way toward a common goal, and the people that are managing those people. And I tried to explain managing is a very personal involvement thing. It's not sitting there in that Dilbert deal. I love Dilbert. And of course, he's pointing out what bad managers do. But they have to be people, they have to be trained in knowing that there's a bell curve of people that are going to be working for them. Some of them are going to be very good. Some of them are going to be less so. Some are going to need coaching, and some have to be weeded out. But you have to trust that they're going to make those decisions every day while being personally involved in achieving the department's goals. It's the only way you can do it. You better concentrate on management development.
We have another question? Please.
You talk a lot about complex systems and management and events-based factors. Can you talk about a big idea
A big idea in which we had to make a gut decision. Well, we do that with our, I won't give you a specific, but I see it occur all the time, and I'll tell you where it occurs, product roadmaps. You have a certain amount of engineering capacity, and you have, it's so much simpler when you have your first service. You got all the wood behind that one arrow. And so you just beat the heck out of it as an organization of people. 25 people around the card table when we started Akamai, right? It's all bright, but the communication link's very short, and we had Terry's money. You know, so, whoa, what could be better? Just spend that money, let's go. But all of a sudden, now, 25 services. Each have a product roadmap. And within each and across them, what are you going to fund? You don't have unlimited. You're trying to also achieve this effectiveness and efficiency in the P&L, let alone add to the balance sheet with cash. So there is where decisions have to be made, and some of them are really tough because you can hear great business cases, that and then when they're kind of equal, we can get so much from this, we can get so much from that. Now you're getting much closer to what the CEO does. And the CEO, that's happening at Yahoo with this, the Carol Bartz. She's making decisions about what Yahoo should be, 5 and 10 years out. And our CEO took over from me in 2005, is very capable at that, but it comes down then when it's breaking the ties. But where you see these decisions crop up, I think, in a technology company is going to be most prevalent. Because ethics are ethics, right? I mean, you don't waffle around on stuff like that. But where you have choices to make, you're going to see it in the product roadmaps. And especially when the budget is only a certain size, and you have to allocate to one or the other. And sometimes they get to the very top. And some people are going to be happy, and some people are not going to be so happy. And that's another sign of leadership, that when they leave the room, so to speak, that once that decision is made, they all agree to go execute it. That was the problem at IBM. They didn't agree to go execute it. Each was running their own fiefdom, and not much cohesion on the whole. I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
So if with executive privilege, let me ask one last question before we break. I don't think all the students know sort of the history of Akamai, maybe between Terry and you, sort of how it got started at MIT in a classroom, right? So maybe, do you want to sort of tell us a little story about that?
Well, it did start in the classroom, and that was Tom Layton, the head of the algorithms group, his graduate student, Danny Lewin, and it was in the middle 90s. I was over at BBN, and remember I told you the story about the internet now was moving into the commercial marketplace from its academic government roots. We were creating an ISP. These guys were watching that, and they knew enough to know that there were about these thousands of networks that were interconnected, and they knew enough to know about them that there was this essential problem, which is they had to share common protocol, but they didn't like each other. They competed with one another, and worse, they did not want to give out, they didn't want to take more traffic than they gave. They understood that that would be a problem. That's why I said was, is, and forever will be. You're not going to change the internet. We're not going to get rid of TCP IP and go to some magical thing. How could that be done? It's always going to have congestion. So they said, you know, there's got to be a way, because this thing is becoming increasingly a business tool. And businesses wants to use heavier bit streams. They're going to have pictures. They envisioned video. They envisioned television, all of which is happening. It's replacing standard broadcast. So they decided to do mathematical models of how would one finesse the bottlenecks and the breakdowns within the individual network. How they started modeling, and they determined, you know, if you could put enough computers in the networks that had the consumers. Now, not all of the 13,000 plus networks, there's a bell curve of density of consumer. Some have a lot of consumers. You can think Comcast but I don't know what your ISP is around here. It probably has a funny name, but they probably have a lot of consumers. And so do the college networks have a lot of consumers. So they modeled this, and even at the time, in the mid-90s, they said, you know, eventually we might have a server in every set-top box. Today, we're talking about, pretend this was my handheld, my BlackBerry, my iPhone, having a server in here, Akamai in here, delivering locally. And it's coming. And you know, it comes in the browser. It'll sit in the browser. So they envisioned that, but they could mathematically prove that this overlay wouldn't run out of gas. That was the big thing I asked. That's the big thing Terry asked. They say, fine, you can handle heavy bit streams, but you know, you're taking on the internet. We do 25%. We do 20+% now of the World Wide Web's traffic is on our network. And that's a significant, as I mentioned with those numbers. But they modeled it, so what happens if it grows and it grows and it grows? You just have to keep getting more decentralized and more decentralized. So we're at 50,000 plus, and I suppose it's a little out of school, but it won't surprise me that in a relatively short time we'll be at 100,000 plus. But then we'll be, you know, in hundreds of thousands of distributed nodes, finessing the bottlenecks of the internet. Now think about it for a minute. If we're all in different locations, and I'm Yahoo, if you all come to me, I can't handle you. But if you each have a server in front of you where we have distributed Yahoo, and you ask for Yahoo, or let's say 3 of you share it, and 3 of you ask for Yahoo, you think that's a big demand on that server? No. And if that server is on the network, your ISP, does it come back quickly to you? Yes, that's the whole theory. We do streaming, frankly, a different way. But we use the same servers and a similar concept to what I just described. But they could model it mathematically. And they said, you know, we could make a business out of this. And so they came to venture capitalists. Well, they went to angels first. And then they came, and they built some software, and they kind of proved it out. Yahoo was an early customer. Disney was an early customer. And then they came to the venture capitalists and said, all the things I told you. We've got this big idea. It works. We think it works. And we think the business model is fantastic. And those of you who know finance know the numbers I gave you are enviable. Enviable to have an 80+% gross margin and a Well, I appreciate you saying that. Some people said I brought adult supervision. That is not true. No, you just bring coordination, active involvement, all that training I told you about how working with people. These people have always been half my age. And then I was 60, and they were less than 30. Some were in their late teens. It was coordination, not supervision. It was coordination. If you just listen to them, they're smart enough to get it, and they were smart enough to work with one another.
Thanks again, George.
Yep.